Awesome. Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a session on building equitable pipelines to veteran hiring. We're really excited to have you joining us here today and looking forward to talking with these experts. So veteran hiring initiatives have been on the rise across sectors and institutions. And while these programs have been instrumental in ensuring the veteran community finds employment after service, these programs are not always built with an intersectional lens to prioritize or even include minority veterans. Serving in the armed forces grants veterans special skills and talents that set them apart from other potential hires, and all veterans deserve equitable opportunities, benefits, and compensation. So sorry, there's an echo. So how do employers find diverse, qualified candidates, and how do minority veterans effectively get their resumes into the hands of hiring managers? What is considered an equitable pipeline? And we are going to cover these answers and solutions during this panel discussion. So first, I would like to do a brief series of introductions. So Crystal Gardner was born in Winston-Salem, attended Harding University High School for the Math, Science, and Technology program with hopes of becoming a genetic engineer. She joined the Army with the hope of getting career training, traveling the world, and earning income. Upon completing medical training as an EMT, she served 4 years in the reserves with an ambulatory unit that supported the 82nd Airborne on missions. Crystal has starred in 3 theatrical productions. Her passion is DE&I and creating a safe space through the hiring process. She focuses on humanizing the hiring process and making it as stress-free as possible. Crystal has led this effort during her time at Wells Fargo, Atrium Health, and Papa John's, and she is currently working at Twitter and as a DE&I certified executive search lead. Keisha earned a bachelor's degree of science from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and found a passion for helping people, which led to a career in human resources. She has continued her education journey by obtaining a master's in business administration, a master's of science in organizational leadership, and is currently pursuing a doctorate in strategic leadership. Over the last 20 years, Keisha has held roles in recruiting, training, and as an HR business partner. Her current role with Comcast focuses on DE&I sourcing for the areas of campus recruiting, early career, and military. She has a passion for giving back and helping the community in which she lives and works. And I'm Lyndon Marchant. I am an Air Force veteran. I was discharged in 2011, and I have volunteered in the minority veteran and active duty space since. Currently, I'm serving as the Economic Impact Programs Manager for Minority Veterans of America, helping to increase awareness and access to resources for marginalized veterans. As a disabled veteran, former trade union apprentice, community college transfer student, and advocate, I firmly believe in the importance of strong support networks and economic stability. In my day job, I work as the Global Experience and Inclusion Analyst at ZX Ventures in Anheuser-Busch InBev's global venture capital firm. So just to start off, I would like to ask a question to both of you. As you both have deep backgrounds in the field of human resources, recruiting, and DE&I, it'd be really lovely if you could share a bit more about your backgrounds and the focus of your work. Crystal, would you mind?
Sure. DE&I has actually just more recently become a passion of mine, and that was brought about from learned and lived experiences being in corporate America and feeling like I had to struggle to make progress and push forward. And so going into HR and recruiting gave me the opportunity to be in conversations where decisions were being made, where we were deciding what talent gets to go where, and the impact of being able to shape ideas as well as decisions around diversity, it invigorated me. And so I would say for the last 2 years, I've been intently focused on ensuring that candidates that are non-traditional, that look like me, that are female, that are LGBTQ, that are veteran, that are disabled, that they all have an opportunity to have a seat and a voice at the table, that you can be your authentic self at work. And so that's really where my passion lies, is making the interview and hiring process human and establishing that connectivity, but also empowering those going through the process, making sure they feel like they're experts in the room when they go through the interview process, and also just amplifying their voice and helping them to find the value in the work that they've done, which is why supporting veterans, being a veteran myself, and just not having opportunity being presented to me because of that, finding ways to be a resource for our veterans, and holding the door open and providing them with tools and training so that they can have opportunity that maybe they haven't experienced before now.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Looking forward to exploring your approach and how your experience informs the rest of these questions and problems that we're going to be discussing. Keisha, could you please speak a little bit more about your 20-something years of experience and how this informs your focus of your work and your background?
It's interesting. My experience has come full circle. So I have to kind of tell where I started to explain how I got to where I am. I grew up in a very small town and I was very sheltered. And I will have to admit that when it came to DEI in general, I had a privileged mindset in the idea that I didn't experience racism. I was sheltered. I was in middle-class America. So when I got out of college, I got a job working at the Urban League of Greater Cincinnati. And I will never forget this. My boss told me that I did not realize that I was Black. And I thought, I have no clue what you mean by that. And it was an experience, and it has taken me that 20 plus years to get it and to understand, because I didn't have the obstacles to get employment. I didn't have obstacles to get an education. That was given to me. It was put on a plate. So when I started working for the Urban League, my role there was to connect the individuals in the underserved community to roles and making sure that there were positions available. And it opened my eyes. And the next step from there was, okay, now I want to expand this. I want to go bigger. So from there, I started working in larger organizations, and I took a role working for a large university in Ohio. And I was in the Office of Equal Opportunity. And again, opened up my eyes to experiences that I had not gone through. And it was a moment of, Keisha, you've got to step back. And now we call it privilege, but we've got to step back. We've got to look at our privilege and understand that, not everyone is able to get and have what I have, or able to do that. And that's everyone. So my goal became, wait a minute, no matter what walk of life we are, whether we're green, blue, purple, whether we're disabled, whether we are a veteran, we need to make sure that we get rid of those barriers and get rid of those boundaries that limit our overall society from attaining greatness. So that takes me full circle. After 20 years of working in those capacities in an HR business partner, my role now came back to, I was an HR business partner, and I was on the backside of helping leaders to build their organizations, to strategize. How do we get from point A to point B? How do we make sure that we are innovative, we're productive, and that we're being the best that we can be? And the way to do that is to make sure that the organization that we are in looks like the communities in which we serve. And that means we have to make a concerted effort that when someone walks in the door, they will find a connection somewhere in the organization that has a pocket. So my role now is to look at, how do we make sure we have that pipeline of all avenues of our organization and of our communities that's represented. So that brings me back full circle, when I didn't understand 30 years ago to now I experience, and I'm trying to make sure that my children are individuals that are coming into the organization, that our next generation have all of the opportunities available to them to become the best that they can be.
That's beautiful. Thank you. So this next question is for you, Keisha, and building on what you just shared. In the post 9/11 era, veteran hiring programs have been an emerging trend in corporate America. So why do companies want to hire veterans, and what unique qualities do veterans have that make them valuable employees?
Okay, perfect. Great question. I want to start by saying, for us, it's not a trend, it's an ingrained part of our culture. Like I said, and I'm going to say this quite a few times, it is our corporate responsibility to make sure that our organization looks like the communities in which we live and which we serve. And it's about doing what's right. And that's one of our pillars. I mean, it's ingrained. It's truly when folks come into the organization, here are the things, kind of like your commandments or the house rules. One of those is to make sure that we are doing what's right. So why do we want to create an environment that's inclusive, and it's all inclusive? So why veterans? Because if we look at the sheer numbers, and I had the opportunity to chat with an individual in our military affairs department to look at statistics. And in that conversation, the numbers he gave just kind of blew my mind when I thought about this. So when we look at creating an environment that looks like our community, let's look at our military population. And though our military population has decreased since 1990, our diversity numbers have increased since 1990. So if we look at from 2004 to 2017, just our minority population as a whole went from 36% to 43%. And of that, 25% of that population in 2004 was Hispanic. It's now 30%, 36% of our population now. So when we look at those numbers, how can we not put the recruitment of our minority veterans as how can it not be a initiative that we strive for and that we make sure that it's important, that it's on top of the list? It has to be, because that's the only way we're going to be able to get our organization to look like our community. So now, when we talk about the unique qualities, when we think about organizations as a whole, innovation and creativity, and how do we get that innovation and creativity? It's not by like-mindedness and it's not by like thoughts. It's by making sure that everybody has a seat at the table. Everybody has an opportunity to give their input, to be able to give their suggestions, to add to the strategies and the goals of the organization. And the way we do that is by making sure, again, and I'm going to repeat this, that our community looks like our organization and vice versa. So when we talk about unique skill sets, it's interesting. I was married to a Marine for 15 years. My brother was a Marine. My fiance was in the Navy. So I've got all of this military background, military family within my family. So it's interesting. I've had the opportunity to have conversations with them. And we were talking about the idea of shifting from going into the military to shifting to going into corporate America. And the one thing that came out that rang true with all of them was, oh my gosh, how do I take the skills that I have and transition that into corporate America? And it was so funny. I sat down even with my brother, and I remember that trip to Paris Island 30 years ago. Yes, I can't lie about my age anymore, but I remember that trip to Paris Island and him getting out of boot camp, and that experience that he had, and all the things he would tell me about that he did. And my conversation with him was, well, wait a minute, Chris, but you did this. This is the identical thing to what we do in corporate America. You just call it something different. So it's the unique skill set is a different perspective to do the same thing that we're doing in an organization, but just a different way of doing it. So it's the opportunity to make sure that we're not being like-minded, because like-minded prevents the opportunity for full growth. I'm not saying it stops it, but it's the opportunity for full growth when we make sure that, again, we have a diverse perspective. And that diverse perspective includes the perspective of our minority veterans.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And looking forward to continuing that as well. I would like to welcome Fawn Sanchez. We have figured out the technical difficulties, thank goodness, and are very lucky to have her join us. Fawn, would you mind taking a moment to introduce yourself? I want to make sure that we cover all of the relevant points. And you're much more impressive than your bio has represented. Oh, you're muted.
All right, well, let's just get that unmute out of the way. Somebody had to do it, right? So sorry I'm late, having some technical issues, and I am in my teenage niece's bedroom, so forgive the background. Yeah, I'm Fawn Sanchez. She, her are my pronouns. I'm Shoshone Bannock from Fort Hall, Idaho, and Carissa Comecrudo from Mexico. I work with AWS and at Amazon, so I manage global field enablement and training for enterprise support, which is our top tier level of service in AWS. And I'm also president of the Global Indigenous at Amazon Employee Resource Group. I am a veteran. I served 8 years active duty. 2 years before that were in the National Guard. I was a 42 Bravo, Human Resources. And since then, I've really just dove into any programs that support transitioning service members and really try to build them up with skills and certifications and experience. So I do a lot of volunteer work here with MVA, also with organizations like ACES and SACNIS that support the underrepresented community, and especially in the technology field. And I live here in Seattle with my 2 children.
Thank you. I appreciate you being willing to introduce yourself. That is much more comprehensive than the introduction I had for you, and would hate to not give your experience justice. So this next question is going to be for Crystal, and then we're going to jump right into a question for you, Fawn. So just as a heads up for your phone. So Crystal, generally speaking, are minority veterans prioritized in these hiring programs, or are there programs that do take an intersectional approach to hiring veterans?
That's a good question. I'm sure that there are. I'm sure that there are, especially given today's climate and just the need for it. And that particular community is asking for that representation in that space. But in my recruiting experience up until this point, I haven't seen it prioritized. So I think it's thrilling that we're at that juncture right now where we can impact change in that space and continue to raise awareness that that segment of the population is wanting to step into positions within corporate America and make their skills that are transferable valuable from a corporate perspective. And so I think that Twitter in particular, I'm thrilled to be a part of an organization that rallies around, again, this segment of viable candidates that have experience. And so one of my personal focuses is to work with leaders and hiring managers to decipher military experience, to make it relevant, to make it fit with the opportunities that we have. Because like you said, a lot of times they're highly skilled, we're highly trained, we've organized projects, we've saved lives, we do so much in all of our roles. There's so much sacrifice and time invested in that. But they also transfer into project management, they transfer into organizational design, they transfer into financial, accounting, mathematics, science, all of those categories. And so a personal goal for myself is to continue to highlight veterans and the opportunity that they can bring to positions and really raise awareness around programs that are taking that approach. Because we are a large tribe of highly skilled individuals that deserve the opportunity to be in positions that we want to be in, but also that given the opportunity, we really make a huge impact and bring a unique perspective to it, unlike what we hiring more of the same, if you will.
Yeah, that is, I totally agree. I actually have one quick follow-up question for you. Do you know of programs that are, once they get veterans in, are genuinely committed to making sure the skills and the communications gaps may be filled in whatever ways are necessary so that the veterans are able to perform at their best?
I think that's a sign of success. Otherwise, how are you measuring your effectiveness? And I think that that's why we're having a conversation now, is so that veterans have resources as well as partners, if you will, within these corporations that understand what value they can add, and then provide them coaching through that. You may have 20 years of military experience and a laundry list of all of these great things that you can execute against well, but is your resume speaking to that? Does your LinkedIn profile feature that? And so that's kind of the area where I like to dwell in terms of just the preparation, the readiness behind getting from military into civilian roles, is making that transition and being a guide, if you will. So
That's such an important person to have as well. So, and the people you work with are very fortunate. So building on that, Fawn, the last 2 years have really brought a new sense of urgency to companies who want to attract diverse talent. And the converse side of that is that relationships with minority communities take quite a long time to build trust. They have to be genuine and authentic. In your work as Indigenous at Amazon Affinity Group president, and the part of your work is to build that trust internally and externally. So what kind of advice do you have for folks who are looking to hire minority veterans and create trusting, authentic relationships?
Landon, you said it so well. Trust is such an important part of that. I think when I first came into Amazon, I quickly realized there was a lot of good intentions. You know, a lot of times when these programs aren't including certain parts of the population, the underrepresented, for instance, a lot of it is not poor intentions. It's simply, it's access, it's a lack of understanding about the anomalies of these communities. One thing that I really try to drive home across the company and across all the organizations I'm with, especially with Native American communities, so speaking more from my own perspective, is that building a community and building that relationship over time is really important. You can't just walk in and say, we have jobs and, you know, we're here to save you. And, you know, we want to employ you. We want to teach you things. You have to be a part of the community. And I think a part of that is also focusing on renewable sources. And so when we think of STEM fields, for instance, or people in technology fields, which is really where I tend to focus with skill building, we have to really start with children and with families, and with starting to participate, give back to the community, have programs that build STEM skills in children. Because, you know, I'm in the Seattle area, and for instance, I'm really good friends with the employee resource group leads from Microsoft and Starbucks and Boeing. And we kind of joke that, you know, even if I hire an Indigenous or a Native American person, I'm just taking it from them. You know, so we have to give back to the workforce also and renew that workforce over time. So I think, you know, my best advice on the recruiting front is to stop focusing so much on the number of people that we're hiring. Focus on the pipeline, focus on skill building, focus on getting into the community and creating relationships really early in those with those youth programs and other programs that support the community through difficult times, things like COVID and other natural disasters that happen. These communities do need support, and the difficulties that they have do prevent them from having access to employment programs sometimes. So you have to focus on meeting their basic needs also.
Such good points. Thank you for calling those out. And you're completely correct. If people can't meet their basic needs, then there is no way for them to also dream about being an engineer or being an ex-CEO. And that starts with children and our high school students. So Crystal, prior to starting at Twitter, you were at Papa John's, and there you co-hosted monthly conversations for new hires and candidates, giving people a sneak peek into company culture. Did you find that the experiences of minority veteran candidates were different from their dominant culture counterparts at all?
yes, I did. And I don't think I didn't become aware of it until I actually attended a job fair specifically for our veterans. I think it was being held by the city of Atlanta, so we joined virtually. And initially it was, I was doing corporate exec side with Papa John's as well. So initially, the other half of my team that focuses on delivery drivers and general managers, in-store type positions, that was the team that was spearheading the conversation at that particular job fair. And I put a hand up. I said, well, wait a minute. Our veterans don't want to drive delivery cars, not if they don't have to. Now, granted, I know that it's COVID. A lot of people have had to rearrange their expectations. People need work. They need to just get out and have something to do. So for that segment of the population that work is geared towards, let's support that any way we can. But I was thinking, I actually looked at it from the lens of being a veteran. And, I thought I would be upset if I bring my resume to a job fair and this is all that the company can offer me, especially when I know good and well, I've got 20 recs that I need to fill. I have a whole financial organization that I'm trying to staff from scratch. So that kind of raised a red flag for me in terms of how we were positioning ourselves at that company to engage with the veteran population. And so I made it even more of a point to not only be there, but answer questions. I was talking to people, send me your resume, let's connect. Even if I don't have anything right now, let's just start the conversation and be in touch so that we're connected. And when I do have something, I'll remember and I'll think about, I've got this awesome pool of talent ready to go. I'm going to go there first because they're usually not even a part of the conversation. And so that's what I'm focused on, is building that community, if you will, within the veteran community, so that I already have connections where I'm going to have the opportunity. So I just need to match it with the right person. And so that's kind of just like the methodology that I used in that particular instance.
That is a fantastic idea, in my opinion, for anyone else who's also looking to create talent pools, because more often than it ever should be happening, what you notice is exactly what does happen, where veterans get slotted into positions that aren't a good fit, or they aren't considered for talent pools. And even if somebody is to put a resume sometimes into a talent pool, they need to be doing that at the right company with the right advocates on the inside who can translate. So Keisha, this next question is for you, and we're moving on from recruiting, because recruiting and hiring minority veterans isn't just about the pipeline. We also have to think about retaining folks. So how does the culture of a company impact minority veterans' ability to stay at a given organization?
Landon, you said it, that recruitment starts the pipeline. It starts. So recruitment, from there, it becomes the foundation. We have to set the foundation, and culture is what sets that foundation. So the idea, the pipeline gets us started. Once we get folks in the door, we have to have a commitment to the individuals that we bring in. We have to have a commitment to our minority veterans through the interviewing process, the onboarding process. And then we get to the point where I think is going to be the most critical for retention, and that's going to be training and engagement. And engagement is the piece that's going to provide that connection, because engagement is a direct lead to culture. So when I think of retention, and especially our minority military veterans, I think of three things, and that's building, teaching, and what I'm going to say is reinforcement and support. And what do I mean by that? Building is, we get someone in the door, we have to build trust, we have to build respect, we have to build an environment in which individuals are going to feel like they are connected. There has to be a place for someone to come in and see somewhere, somehow, that looks, feels, talks, acts like they do. So that could be an ERG. We have some amazing ERGs. It's also the opportunity for us to create an environment that's a safe environment. That environment that says, okay, here's where I spent. I have a friend who retired from the military. He retired from the Marine Corps and shifted from the Marine Corps to education. And it was, I got these phone calls and say, okay, Keisha, here's what we did in the military. Can I do that in this setting? No, you can't, but here's another way to approach it. But the difference is, the interesting is that he came to me because of the fact the environments are so different. So we have to make it a safe environment that individual doesn't come to a friend he knows in HR, but he feels, or she feels, comfortable going to that organization, because the organization creates that culture that says, my experience was different. Help me connect my experience to the environment that I'm in. So once we do that, it opens that safe environment. But then the last thing we have to do, or I shouldn't say last, is a couple of things. We have to provide the teaching tools. We have to provide training that says, here are the house rules for the new organization, because the house rules were different in the previous organization. Let's set the standard that says, okay, you can do this, you can't do this, and here's why, so that it becomes part of the culture. It becomes ingrained in the individual who's transitioning from the military world to corporate America. So we have to be willing to teach. We have to provide those tools. We can't just throw somebody in and say, okay, here you go, you figure it out. We have to provide those tools. And then the last piece of this is the idea of providing what I'm going to call reinforcement and support. And what I mean by reinforcement is that we have to provide ongoing training as needed. And when I say training, I'm not talking about, hey, I'm a programmer and you're going to teach me Java. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the soft skill side, because that's where the retention piece becomes more important, is the soft skill piece that helps us connect, feel a part of the organization, that helps us understand that the culture is part of me and that culture is part of what I fit into. So with that, we have to provide opportunities for reinforcement and support. And we do that in several means. We have an open door policy where individuals have the opportunity to come to whomever, however they need, to be able to get the tools that they need. But again, we have to create a safe environment that even though we say that it's there, those tools are there, that someone really feels that the tools are available. So then it becomes, our culture is now a culture where we're inclusive, because we value the differences of, here's my experience, here's a current experience. We're going to make a concerted effort to make sure that we merge those together. So again, it becomes the support, it becomes reinforcement, and it becomes creating that environment that creates the culture of, hey, everyone's welcome, and this is the right place. This is the place for me.
Brilliant. So I'm going to, apologies to the wonderful MBA comms team who gave me a wonderful structure for these questions, but I would like to ask a follow-up on to what you just said, Keisha, now. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what you just said about building culture and training and creating a environment where people are retained and build that trust during COVID. How do we do this now?
And make everyone feel connected. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting. COVID has done some wonderful things, and I'm not being sarcastic when I say this. COVID has done some wonderful things to force us to look at how do we make sure that we provide inclusive training. And interesting, so Landon, when we think about this, we now have to keep in mind abilities as we look at training. We have this wonderful world of technology, but we have to make sure that technology is available for everyone. We also have to make sure that that training is done in a way that it fits the needs of those individuals, everyone in the organization. And what do I mean by that? I may be a person that doesn't learn visually, or it may be hearing impaired. So we have to make sure that the trainings are available in any mechanism that is appropriate and is inclusive. But we also have to look at the how, the why, and the what, making sure that it connects with individuals. So what are we doing as an organization? For example, my team specifically, we started creating videos. So as we have initiatives and we start and we gather people to help us with the work that we're doing, we realize, okay, we can create a placemat, a splash card that says, hey, here are the steps that you need, which is great. So what about someone else who doesn't want it in that capacity? Then we created a video that says, hey, you can listen to this. Or we created an open door. Hey, give us a call, just reach out, have that connection. So it's all that we have to take a look at all of the needs, make sure that we're inclusive. And I'm going to go back to thinking outside of the box to make sure that our community internally looks like our community externally, and that we are creating ideas, generating ideas that are going to somehow build that connection with all members of our organization.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So Fawn, question for you. So candidate evaluation is one of the places where companies look to hire veterans and then go through the process that they're familiar with. and minority identified individuals more broadly in this, veterans and not, tend to be most challenged during the first evaluation process. So can you speak a little bit more about how traditional candidate evaluations advantage folks from dominant culture identities, and how companies can move beyond traditional measurements to source more minority identified candidates?
Yeah, this is an issue that's close to my heart. I was actually homeschooled growing up, and I grew up in the Quileute Reservation here in Washington, like really small community. When I got to school, I was horrible at standardized testing, still am. And it's actually proven. There's studies that show that that minority populations and also Native American populations perform really honestly kind of poorly on standardized testing. There's a mistrust with standardized testing in Native American communities. It's something that I've brought up to our recruiting teams. Even at Amazon, we do an online assessment, and the diverse parts of our talent pool, simply put, they don't make it through at the same rate that everybody else does. And it's not because they're not as smart. It's because there is this sort of history of the use of standardized testing to gauge a workforce or a community or population against the rest of, just talking about America's against the rest of the American population. And there's so many anomalies that are different. I think maybe even, the rest of the panel here would maybe be able to answer this better than I can, since I'm not actually in recruiting right now. But I think one thing that we've done really to try to combat that is to spread a lot more cultural awareness about some of the anomalies of Native communities. Specifically, one thing that comes up in interviewing is like, I was taught never to brag about myself. It's really uncomfortable for me to use I did this, and just really brag about my achievements. And so I think if we can educate our workforce, our recruiting workforce, and the people that are doing the talent assessments about some of those cultural anomalies, I think that really helps. Also, I think the way that the forms are set up doesn't really accommodate all of our different names. I've got like my English name, and then I have my regular name that I go by. And it's really hard to just get that through when you're applying for, big corporations that don't really have anybody there. And somebody said it in the chat as well, that, that's part of tokenism. I think if we are just focusing on just hiring diverse talent, then that's tokenism. We have to take it a step further and make diversity a part of how we do business, and really just integrate it into every piece of the hiring cycle, and then continue that with programs that promote mentorship and sponsorship and growth once they are with the company.
Brilliant. I thank you so much for that, and also for the reiterating just the importance of the ecosystem that somebody would find themselves in once they've managed to navigate this completely not designed for them system. Keisha and Crystal, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
So, Fawn, you said something about tokenism, and I had a conversation with someone recently about tokenism, and the key that you mentioned was it becomes ingrained, and it's about inclusivity throughout the entire process. So tokenism, if we do this right, if we recruit properly, if we onboard properly, if we set our culture properly, it will have nothing to do about tokenism. It will be about finding the best candidate, but making sure that all individuals are prepared and appropriately ready to be able to enter our environment. So yeah, I hear you when you say tokenism, and it just rung a bell because I just had that conversation. But it's interesting that we can take tokenism out of the game when we make sure that all of our process from start to finish, retention, promotion, all of it, all of our employment processes are done based on an inclusive slate.
Keisha, and if I can just tie that really quickly to a point Crystal made, I think, what's important there too is allyship. I think it's like, you don't have to be, a minority to make this a part of the way that you do business. And Crystal, you mentioned, even if you don't have openings as a hiring manager, there's still so many ways to be an ally, amplifying programs, out there. Like there are people in the chat are mentioning Wounded Warrior programs and other programs that support veterans and people from underrepresented communities. Sometimes it's just a matter of just sharing those on LinkedIn and just helping people to create that network. So I think we can all be an ally to everybody. And that is a part of just, I think you set the example for other people that this just becomes how you do business.
I love that, Fawn. You're so right. We need to do this more often. Like,
It's
I'm
fun
so
to chat about.
inspired. I'm so inspired. But I think that also just kind of highlights how important this work is that we do, and just how privileged we are as, individuals to be at certain places within each of these organizations that are committed to driving change, moving the needle forward, opening the door. So I'm super grateful to be on this panel with each of you, because we're really impacting change just through conversation today.
Truly are. So I actually, wonderful lead into the last question, or one of my last two questions, by the way, and I really appreciate just having the impact of these conversations be called out, because the first thing that needs to happen is we need to have conversations, and in order to be able to even know, like, inform the landscape as well as reach out to people. And so my question for you all, actually, is this for everyone, is how can minority veteran hiring pipelines be built? Are we starting from scratch, or is there a way to incorporate an equity lens into existing veterans recruiting programs and build with an equitable lens to ensure that minority veteran candidates are more likely to see more success? Do we have to start from scratch, or can we work with what's there?
So Landon, I'll jump in. That's a great question. I don't believe we have to start from scratch, but I believe we always have to be at a point of self-evaluation to make sure that what we are doing works. Our organization looks at, and I can speak for us in what we do, we have an internal and external perspective. So obviously our goal is to grab a pipeline, get a pipeline, but we are always looking at, are we in the right places? Are we looking at the right organizations? Are we going to the right spots? So for example, if I want to build a toy for a kid, I'm not going to go advertise where the demographics are going to be individuals above the age of 18, right? So we have to make sure that where we're looking is going to get us the people that we are hoping to attract. And again, making sure as we are recruiting, this becomes habit. As we are looking at our organization, we look like the communities from which we are in. So does that mean we have to start from scratch? I don't think so. But again, it means a continual look at. In our organization, we also take that a step further. Once we do our pipeline, we want to make sure that we prepare individuals for that conversation when they're sitting in front of the leader. So mock interviews. Having discussion with candidates about, hey, tell me what you've done. Based on that conversation, you know what? You've actually done, as Crystal mentioned before, this skill transfers over into program management or project management. Talk about it this way, mention it this way. Here's the connection. So we actually take that step of saying, and I'm not going to say it's above and beyond, it's the step that we should be taking. It should be the baseline that we are connecting individuals. Step A, get them in the organization, then prepare them to go in front of our leaders so that when a leader is sitting there, that they are looking at that candidate just like somebody else who has not had that same background. And then the next step is making sure our leaders understand how to take that candidate, transfer those skills into the skills that they need in the organization, and realize, oh my gosh, I've got a gem in disguise, and this is the person that I want in my organization.
Yeah, you're so right with that, Keisha. I can speak from my experience too. I'm still pretty new at Twitter, 7 weeks starting next week. But as I'm finding my footing, I'm also realizing that there's a reason that I'm in the room too, and that's to help executives understand those gaps of skills and summary and experience on a resume from like a veteran, if you will, and just helping to navigate through the process and be a guide, if you will, so that we don't overlook opportunities to have conversations with talent. And so that's a key piece too, in terms of just preparing my candidates for those conversations. I love to make sure that they feel confident and empowered and that they have their talking points together, because you only get about 30 to 45 minutes with these hiring managers, these executives, these decision makers, I want them to be prepared to make sure that every minute counts. And I have to say that it's like you said, it's not a thing of measuring the quantity. We're focused on the quality and making sure that each interaction, whether it results in a hire today or later on, that is still valuable. And so anybody that I work with, I want them to come away feeling like you've learned something, you've elevated, you've been motivated, you can take on the next step of the process, empowered. And even if you don't, again, don't get this particular opportunity, at least moving forward, you have something that you take with you to make you better prepared for conversations with other recruiters, within a new role that you take on, and then when it's your turn to hold the door open. So it's all about education in that circle of life.
Yeah, you all said it best. I think it really cannot be a one size fits all approach. I think that's dispelling that is the first step. And everybody here on the phone knows that the transition from the military looks different for everybody, and there's different issues that people have. There's different things people want to do. Also, like Keisha said, sometimes people don't even know what they want to do. I know when I got out, I had no idea what I was qualified to do. I'd been in the Army since I was 17. It was like the only job I'd ever had. I had no idea what I could do, what I should be looking for. So, I saw these advertisements, but didn't know what I was qualified to do. I think it's like you also have to account for the anomalies of the workforce that not everybody wants to just move to Seattle or work in the city, and sometimes they want to stay home. So I think COVID has given us a little bit of opportunity to innovate. I love that remote work is becoming more of a thing. I think that'll help those that are transitioning out of the service and that want to return home and want to be near their families, but still have access to opportunities. So I've been really excited about that with having more remote work available.
On the remote work points, Fawn, quick question, and feel free, everyone else, if you also want to jump in. But to what degree do you think regionality impacts minority veterans hiring, and since the opportunities that are sometimes offered as remote roles can be limited?
I think it's a huge impact, Landon. Like I said, when I got out, there were opportunities, but they were in Washington, D.C., or Seattle. And, I wanted to move back home. I didn't want to move to any of those locations. So I spent 9 months without a job. And it was a horrible, dark time in my life because I didn't, I started to lose hope that nothing was out there for me. It's been about 9 years since then. So I've been able to, I think, get to that point where I can change that for other veterans. But I think we have to create opportunities for these people in other places. Regionality is something that it's not inclusive to all of the workforce, especially minority veterans and those coming from underserved communities. Remote work is really important. I think we have to bring the opportunities to people. We have to bring the skill building opportunities to them and grow that workforce. There may come a time when you have to move, and that is a part of working for a big corporation sometimes. But I'm excited about the fact that a lot of the larger corporations are opening up remote work. I know at Amazon we are. I work in AWS and most of us are remote now, which is incredible. So I think that right there is going to really open up opportunity for more of the diverse workforce that they simply didn't have access to before.
Yeah, that definitely is. That's very exciting to hear that Amazon is joining the early adopters for more remote work.
Well, they weren't necessarily early adopters, but they finally got on board after realizing everybody else was doing it.
Cool. So one more question before we wrap up. Well, correction, 2 questions. One is the last one. So I wanted to touch on this idea of finding someone a good fit. So we've been talking a lot about from the recruiting side and from the advocacy side of how do we as individuals within an organization or in our own spare time work to make sure people land where they belong. From the other side, what kind of resources or opportunities, what kinds of things can a minority veteran do in order to be able to get access to a career, not just a job, but a career with room for advancement? Do they research and connect with employers that are friendly for diverse populations? Do they look for veteran employers? How does somebody that we're helping, how do they go about this?
You know, if I can just share, one of my biggest lessons learned getting out of the military was I didn't quite know what to apply for, but I had an idea of what I wanted to do. And I realized after time it was, this might sound bad, but it was best to kind of let go of that idea and just be open to some opportunities. So I tried to shift my mindset a little to just being open to opportunities that would allow me to grow. The first thing I needed to do was just get a job, obviously, so I could have health insurance and that sort of thing. But once I did that, then starting to focus on finding a place that I could grow and find out what I was good at, because I really didn't know. So I think on the veteran side, you know, thinking of it more as like being open to opportunity, being open to exploring programs that you might not normally consider based on your experience is really important.
Landon, I would absolutely, I'm going to add my 2 cents. I would absolutely agree. And the other piece is to not be afraid to build connections. We hear all the time the idea that, you know, the who you know is how you get, you know, what you want. And I'm not saying that to the extent. What I'm saying with that is who you know will help you determine and decide those things that you want to do, because it takes that personal connection to be able to say, hey, tell me about what you do. Tell me about what you like about that role. Tell me what you dislike about that role. What is it that takes you into work every morning? And it's that conversation. And when I say who you know, that's what I mean. It's that conversation that's going to help decide, how do I find the career? How do I find what I want to do? My brother, as I mentioned, is a former Marine and became a police officer. He's now retired, retired again. Keisha, what do I want to do? I've spent all my life doing this in the military. I spent my life doing this in the police force. Okay, but I can't go to corporate America. And we started talking. I said, you know what, Chris, I have a role that does this, 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 and this. Oh, I did that in the military. See, exactly. It's those conversations. It's those connections. It's not being afraid to say, hey, can you tell me about what you do? To help folks actually build and figure out, what do I want to do when I grow up? What does that career look like?
And just to piggyback off of what everyone else has echoed, I also think that some of the onus is on the HR recruiting side of the house too. Your recruiters need to be open to having conversations, to slowing down and taking the time to be a resource and help coach, walk your candidates through that process. I started out in agency recruiting, and with that is numbers. It's go, 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 get cheeks and seats, hire as many people as you can. And I never liked that approach. I've always been the one that let's talk it through. Let's make sure you have all the information you need. I think that that's the level of care that everyone should give, but even more so our veterans. And so I'm working internally with my team to, again, help them to decipher when they see profiles that are non-traditional, but not only taking it a step further than the paper. Then once you get into the conversation with the candidates, how are you showing them grace? How are you extending compassion and helping them to talk through, again, their experience and give them that white glove service that they deserve? So that's a conversation that hopefully internally as recruiters we'll find the time to make the time where we can to have a more meaningful experience in that space with our candidates.
Brilliant. I really appreciate the thoughtful responses here, and you're all painting a picture that shows that it's not just on one person's responsibility or the other. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise, for giving some guidance for the veterans who are applying, for the HR professionals, for the leaders who may be thinking about their 1 and 5 year plans for how HR should work within their company and what their people processes are for the year. With that, I would just like to say again a big thank you for joining us, and thank you to the audience for your questions and for participating and coming and enjoying the Minority Veterans Summit. We hope you have a great time, and go check out the hiring booths and the other wonderful presentations, and especially the lightning rounds. There's a ton of wonderful, brilliant people who are going to be sharing and speaking. So thank you so much.